Love staying informed? Subscribe now and get unlimited access to local news, weather, and sports for just 99 cents a month for your first 3 months at inforum.news/join. Read every story, listen to every podcast, and download the apps that keep you informed and on the go 24 hours a day. So head to inforum.news/join right now to subscribe. What are you waiting for? Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month at inforum.news/join.
Welcome to Plain Talk. We're going to talk with a filmmaker. Believe it or not, North Dakota has a filmmaking industry. You should know that there's a lot of good stuff being made out there. I don't know. I mean, we're not Hollywood by any stretch of the imagination, but one of the great things about living on the internet is we don't have to be Hollywood. There's a lot of great ways to deliver great content. There's very creative people doing very cool stuff. And rightfully, I think, our legislature makes grants available for this industry and a lot of other industries too. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking, frankly, what are relatively modest amounts of taxpayer dollars and making them available so that to help support creative people. Because I got to tell you, getting businesses like this off the ground, finding an audience, all those things, as somebody who's, I guess, kind of works maybe sort of in a creative world myself. I mean, listen, I started with a blog. That's where my career started. I can't tell you how hard that was to, find the time, and I had to still make a living and feed my kids and everything else. It's tough. It's tough out there. So I'm glad that our legislature does stuff like this, but there's a recent example of a filmmaker grant, and I believe I was the first to report about this earlier this year, but recently filmmakers who are struggling to get answers from our state government held a press conference up at the state capitol, calling for an investigation by the attorney general, calling maybe for an investigation by the state auditor. But even before that, they had asked for some answers from Governor Doug Burgum because the grant in question came through, the legislature appropriated the money and it came through the Commerce Department. Now, I want to set this up for you a little bit so you understand what's going on. What we're talking about really are two grants. One from 2021 that was given to an organization called Canticle Productions. And you probably know them. My favorite one of their films, excellent film, I thought, was The End of the Rope, about a lynch mob here in North Dakota. It's very good. Look that up. I would definitely watch it if you haven't. They got a grant for that film, $100,000, but it wasn't advertised to anybody. They got another grant this year. The state legislature, during their 2023 regular session earlier this year, appropriated money for it. I think they actually appropriated money for multiple grants, but Canticle Production ended up getting all of the money, $600,000. So we're not talking about a small amount of money by any stretch. $600,000. And the process around it, frankly, leaves much to be desired. Commerce Department advertised the availability of the grant starting on Friday, July 21st of this year at 4 p.m. 4 p.m. on a Friday. And, I mean, that wouldn't necessarily be a problem if there was a longer time window to access the grant, but that window closed 10 calendar days, just 6 business days later. Very few of North Dakota's filmmakers even knew that the money was available, and Canticle Productions got it. Now, if you go back and you watch the floor testimony, the floor debate about House Bill 1018, that's the Commerce Department budget, which included the appropriation for this grant, lawmakers were talking on the floor as though they already knew where this money was going. Now, the reason why this is all important is Article 10, Section 18 of the North Dakota State Constitution states, "Neither the state nor any political subdivision thereof shall otherwise loan or give its credit or make donations to or in aid of any individual, association, or corporation except for reasonable support of the poor. That is what's called the gift clause of our state constitution. It means that our lawmakers can't just appropriate money and write a check to a specific person. That's why when the state makes grants, they do it through a competitive process. They aren't funding a specific person. They are funding a program that in turn makes grants to qualifying individuals or qualifying businesses or organizations. But it kind of seems like they did an end run around that. Here to talk with me about all this is Matt Fern. Matt is a very talented filmmaker. You may have seen his documentary about the controversy about the Fighting Sioux logo at the University of North Dakota, which, by the way, if you watch that, you will see a very young and dashing Rob Port giving commentary, and that's the only piece of your work I'm going to bring up, Matt, because that's the only one that I'm in. Matt's nodding. Yes, this makes perfect sense, Rob. Matt, welcome to the program. Of course, my co-host Ben Hansen joining me as well. Matt, how you doing?
Doing good. Thank you, Rob and Ben, for having me. I appreciate it.
So you had about, what was it, two dozen roughly filmmakers with you up at the state capitol yesterday?
Yeah. So I submitted the letter on behalf of 27 filmmakers across North Dakota, representing 17 different video production companies. And we're following up on the questions that we asked the governor over 3 months ago about concerns about the grants that you mentioned. Our four main, areas of concern are there's no bids in 2021 for that $100,000. There's only 6 business days for the $600,000 this year. And for the application that Canonical was awarded that $600,000, there is very thin requirements for that. It was literally a 1.5-page document with no script, no address, no breakdown of budget between the 2 films, just pretty much saying, I want to do these 2 films, and no information on cast, no distribution strategy. I mean, this is shocking that this is all that was needed to be awarded $600,000. And then the last thing that we have questions about is in that 1.5-page application that Canonical was approved to get $600,000. They requested payment through a nonprofit arm. I'll quote their application directly. If awarded the grant, we would request that payment be made to Canonical Productions through our nonprofit arm, Grain of Wheat Productions. And so in searching this North Dakota Secretary of State website, Grain of Wheat Productions wasn't even registered with the state as a nonprofit when they submitted this application. And it does share the same residential address as Canonical Productions. So they don't even have a physical office. But more importantly, I believe, is that $600,000 this last session was awarded to them with really no requirements. I mean, just a 1.5-page document that was probably written in about 15 minutes.
Matt, I want to keep on this. I mean, this is a very important slice of this topic, and it is what your press conference was about yesterday. But I also want you to be able to talk a little bit about yourself and the other folks who you said were with you yesterday. To Rob's point, I'm guessing maybe the average North Dakotan who isn't kind of on the art scene, I would suppose, doesn't really know that we have a filmmaking industry here. And I did want to talk a little bit about the state's history with production tax credits. So, can you just speak really quickly to kind of where you're located, where your fellow filmmaking groups and businesses are doing, and what kind of projects they work on really quick, so we can kind of get the lay of the land here?
Yeah, the filmmakers that are part of this letter, representing the 17 different companies, are all across the state. I'm located in Bismarck. I primarily do advertising work for different companies across the state and country, but also, like Rob mentioned, do documentaries. Also on the list is a company, Threefold, which does really amazing national work up in Fargo. There's Chamber 6 Media in Minot. We have Make a Difference Pictures, Bennett Creative Media. It also Minot is Dice Media. I mean, these companies are all over. Primarily, they do ad work, but a lot of them do great independent films. Not a lot have been able to get theatrical release, but the industry is alive and well.
How many, I'm not your auditor here, but could you give me a ballpark on how many employees you have here? Are these more passion projects on the side, a mixture of both?
I mean, everyone on our list is a full-time filmmaker. Some of them have larger employees than others. But I mean, these are real video production companies here. And this is their full-time job. And also, I think these grants could be used on a bigger scale to help larger national products. Just last week, Fargo premiered season 5. Fargo on FX is a very critically acclaimed show, gets lots of national, global attention, and it's shot up in Canada. And that's because there's a lack of tax incentives and a lack of infrastructure. A majority of places that get the large productions offer tax incentives, but it's usually a dollar in, dollar out. If your company spends money in our state, we will give you money back. And the reasoning behind that is that it provides a boost into a lot of the hospitality industries by having these large crews come in, promotes tourism and travel by showing the world these areas in North Dakota. And it also provides a lot of high-paying jobs for different filmmaking professionals, and also experience for up-and-coming filmmakers to have the opportunity to be on these big projects.
I also like the community that it builds. I mean, when you allow for creative people and you create I don't know what you want to call it, a space, an environment where creative people can work in North Dakota, then what those creative people could do outside of filmmaking becomes amazing. Now it's like we have now got a community of creative people that can be tapped for all sorts of other things as well. I think it's an overall good thing. Matt, one of the reasons why, my perception, I guess you could tell me if I'm right or not, my perception, one of the reasons why you filmmakers are upset about this is that getting these grants, especially in a conservative state like North Dakota, getting these grants is tough. And a lot of the reasons is, where people tend to be skeptical because sometimes when the government starts, there can be favoritism or other things. And that's one of the things people are I think legitimately, I think that's a fair concern, to be concerned that these things won't be handled appropriately by the government. And then something like this happens, and it's kind of like you're giving the critics of doing this sort of thing ammunition. Is that fair to say, one of the reasons why I get driving your angst about this?
Yeah, and it also caused a lot of hesitation between our group of, do we want to speak out? Is this going to do more damage than good? But the big kind of driving factor was Canonical and Department of Commerce already had a crack at this 2 years ago. They got $100,000 2 years ago. And the only reason we know that Canonical got it was because I emailed them and asked them who got that money. Because it wasn't listed anywhere publicly. Canonical never mentioned it while promoting End of the Rope. The Department of Commerce never mentioned it. At least as far as I could find, all they told in reporting their budget was that money had been expended.
By the way, I feel like if you get $100,000 from the North Dakota taxpayers, maybe we could get a credit, right? I mean, maybe you could put it in the credits. Hey, thank you, state of North Dakota.
Yes. I mean, yes, that's literally what happens, so folks know. I mean, not every movie is a large multi-million-dollar Marvel or Star Wars production, but in Georgia, they passed pretty, I won't even say generous, they're tax credits. It's not even subsidies, but they are large, and they were viewed with some skepticism at the time. And now Atlanta is basically the home of most of Disney's productions. And if you look at a lot of the end credits on these big blockbuster movies, there's a Georgia Peach at the end logo, because they are filmed there, to Rob's point about getting credit for the state of Georgia for filming there. And I don't think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Matt, so I want you to speak to this. I don't think the bill sponsors here, I don't think the Department of Commerce, I don't think you and fellow filmmakers are saying, we're going to have, the next James Bond movie filmed in North Dakota tomorrow. To me, what you're saying is you have stories to tell about North Dakota, stories to be told in North Dakota. You reference literally a show that's named after the largest city in the state of North Dakota that is being filmed in Canada, because Canada has the exact same kind of production credits. That's why, like, big shows like from the X-Files onward, like whenever they're trying to filming New York, supposedly, they're usually in Toronto doing it, right? And it's a big boost to the Hospitality Association there. Were you confused when there was a $600,000? I was confused that it went to one place. You're saying that there were 17 people that were able to show up physically at a press conference in Bismarck. I was thinking when I heard about it for the first time, this would be a great seed money source to 10, 20 projects over the next biennium for the kind of films you would be making. Was there any talk like that when amongst the film community that you knew of applying for these things? Have you ever experienced anything similar to this with other grants you've applied for as a filmmaker?
Yeah, well, in regards to other grants, they have so much more requirements to them. So this is a big difference for that.
For more or less money than $600,000 usually.
Oh yeah, this is unheard of. And then
unheard of in that it's much higher than you're used to hearing.
Well, even for a $10,000, $5,000 grant, there's a huge amount of requirements needed. Not a page and a half just saying I want to make.
And I'm asking that because most folks listening to this have never been a filmmaker, so they don't know, is 600,000 big? They hear Marvel movies cost $200 million. They don't know.
Yeah, so obviously we can't compete with the large industries, but this is a start. The last filmmaker grant that I'm aware of was in 2020, and that was for around, I believe, $25,000. And then from Department of Commerce, I think that was a discretionary fund. But these grants are different. The name of the grants are the Motion Picture Production and Recruitment Grants. And so I don't understand who they are recruiting by just having Canonical do this. I think there needs to be some discussions by the Department of Commerce with the industry, the film industry. How can we establish some rules? Out of the last $600,000, there were 4 applications received, Canonical being one of them. The other 3 weren't even for feature-length films. They're for TV show pilots. So I think there needs to be an establishment of what is this fund for? Is it for micro-budget films, or is it for trying to get Fargo here? Is it for larger projects? $600,000, I mean, if you have someone matching those funds, that's $1.2 million. That's enough to make a really good, low budget film with some name actors. So, I mean, it really can do some good. But you're also right. Would it be more effective to have micro documentaries or to break that up? Should there be limits on how much one company gets? Should there be requirements of people, having proof of funds and then the government matches them to get the most bang for the state's buck? Should there be a limit of how many times a company should apply? All of these questions are out there, but none of them were discussed. It just was open for 6 business
pretty basic
days,
to me.
and it was over. Yes, and just to go back to your earlier point of how it can really affect the whole state, you mentioned Georgia. I know many people in the film industry who moved to Georgia, moved their families to Georgia because there is consistent work there, because the tax incentives motivate the studios to go there and film there, because you pretty much double your budget. You guarantee at least some money back. And so why wouldn't you film there for when you can double your budget for Fargo?
And very frankly, Atlanta's not been a cheap place to live for a very long time. So the fact that someone's incentivized to go move there versus the housing costs in North Dakota, I mean, there's no comparison. What were you saying?
Yeah, these grants can be so great. Not only can it help have people move here, build an industry, but it also can build awareness. I mean, North Dakota, I still believe, has kind of a isn't very well known globally, or has somewhat of a lost perception nationally. And why can't we do something about that? We have amazing stories. We're an amazing state. Why can't we showcase what we have? I think there's so many benefits from these grants in terms of marketing, industry, taxpayer money, and none of it's getting done, I believe, by how they're acting right now. I'm very
open-minded about this, because I look across kind of the I guess industry. I mean, I'm certainly not a film industry insider or anything like that, but I can look at everything that's available to us right now. I mean, I look at my own habits and how many, like I am watching much more esoteric niche things than I would have at another time. And I think we just lost Matt for here comes Matt again. Here comes Matt back. We're just gonna keep rolling with this, Matt. What I was just saying is that I'm not a film industry expert by any, but I am a consumer. I do have a whole bunch of streaming services. I have YouTube. I do all this stuff. I'm very open-minded. It seems like there's such a big opportunity right now. There are so many avenues down which we can push. I mean, it used to be if you made a documentary, you know, unless you lived in a big city that had like an independent theater that was going to show it, or it got picked up by an HBO or something like that, most people were never going to see your documentary. That has changed now. You could seek these things out. You could put the documentary on YouTube. You got Hulu. You got I watch these things all the time. I have very esoteric interests, and it pleases me that so much of this content is available. So this moment in history, what's going on with the larger industry, is a really big deal. So there's a lot of things that we can make here in North Dakota, and it doesn't have to be a Marvel movie. It could just be a fun or challenging or depressing or inspiring documentary about things that have happened in North Dakota or based in North Dakota. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is we can't afford to screw this up right now. We're kind of at a key moment, and I feel like we're screwing it up a little bit. And I also want to put it together. I don't have anything against Canonical Productions. You know, I'm familiar. I don't really know. I'm familiar with some of their work. You know, they're out there. They're trying to make films. They're taking the money where they could get it. I don't blame them for that.
I want to ask Matt, because we've used their name a lot because they are the grantees. I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
I don't blame them because they make good movies, and so it's not their fault. The problem here is the process that the state has.
But I want to ask Matt, have you or the other filmmakers in this press conference, have you had interactions or have you talked to Canonical one way or another about this grant, about their process, about their interaction with the Chamber of Commerce?
I have known the founder of Canonical Productions for years. I've made films with him. End of the Rope, I went out to the set to visit and support them. I have friends with pretty much everyone on the crew. But no, I have not heard from them, partly because the last time I did talk to Dan with Canonical Productions, we were talking about trying to make movies in North Dakota, trying to find funding for movies in North Dakota. And he just mentioned very nonchalantly, I got a little bit of money from the Department of Commerce. And it was in a way, it was very just off the cuff. I just assumed it was maybe $1,000, $5,000. No idea it was $100,000, let alone did anyone else in the state know that. And so, no, I have not heard from him since. He's got my number. I'd love to talk to him. And as far as I've seen, he's declined all comments from the press. We are considering a ethics complaint against Canonical Productions. We're looking in if they did violate any lobbyist laws. In one of your articles, Rob, it was mentioned that they hosted Brad Beckedahl at a screening. Yet Canonical or no representatives are listed as any lobbyists. Also, we wonder why Canonical was chosen for that $100,000 2 years ago. What made that company so special? So nothing against Canonical Productions, but would love to hear from them. I don't think it's my job to reach out to them. And then. Yeah. Was there another question I missed? I'm sorry.
Well, I think the larger point is, I mean, that we could do this better, and we don't have to. I look at this is something like this comes up. It's an opportunity to learn, right? North Dakota is getting into this business, and we're trying to do it. And if we didn't do it right on this grant, it's okay as long as we just acknowledge the mistake. Right. Let's acknowledge them and let's do better going forward. Right. I mean, I don't really want to have a punitive. I guess my preference is that I don't want a punitive thing. I don't want people to feel bad at this. I just want them to look at this and say, listen, we didn't do this the right way. There's a better way to do this, a more fair way to do this. And by the way, one that's in compliance with the law, because again, if the legislature is everybody's kind of wink, wink, nod, nod. We know where this money's going, even though it's ostensibly going to a competitive grant process. But everybody's kind of wink, wink, nod, nod. We actually know where it's going. They are violating the state constitution. If that's what's going on, they're violating the state constitution. So all I'm saying is do better. That's my argument. Do better.
Yes. And if our number one request is to find out if this was done legally. And our second request was, if it is done legally, how can we be more accountable and transparent in the forward? So more video production companies, more filmmakers, more stories of North Dakota have the opportunity to be told, rather than just just the same company over and over.
Matt, one of the stipulations of the grant, I believe, and Rob can correct me if I'm wrong, is that there has to be a North Dakota connection, maybe even a North Dakota historical like value. And I don't know how they really framed it with the grant. Now, just cards on the table. My personal opinion is I think that's a mistake. I think it's short-sighted, or there could be a separate subcategory for that, or extra funds, maybe something. But I know in Canada, the Canadian government used to put on like a percentage of Canadian content requirement on their productions. And they dropped that pretty quickly because they realized when you open it up, you open up everything, and everything's being filmed in Canada. And we've referenced the Atlanta or the Georgia tax credits multiple times. That's home to a lot of Disney productions. So at this point, it's a lot of stuff set in space. You could be in Australia, you could be in China, who knows where. But to me, I think they should maybe remove that and allow just other productions, other things to come in there. Has there been, now it's a little bit unfair because I do want to hear your opinion on that, but I also want to know if you've talked to other filmmakers about it. And it's, I say that's unfair because it's not as if you're the head of a union or an association, unless there is one that I'm aware of. You just happen to know these folks being in the industry. Has there been any discussion about that aspect? Am I off in La La Land?
No, between myself and the group, we have not talked about, the requirements of them. We're just happy that filmmakers have an opportunity. And we think this is a great foot in the door. We just, after Canonical received $100,000, as far as we can see, the state really didn't get much of a return out of that. We're afraid this $600,000 is going to have the same track record, where they're going to do 2 more movies, they'll self-release them across the state, and that'll be about it. And so we're afraid that other filmmakers won't have that opportunity. So we're open for whatever, as long as it supports Filmmaker. Regarding to the eligibility for this $600,000, I would like to read real quick the eligibility from the Commerce announcement. It says eligible applicants must be based in North Dakota, propose a project with filming and production in the state, and demonstrate a history of distributing impactful motion pictures about North Dakota's land, history, and citizens. And so that seems kind of broad, but I just want to point out that a year before that was posted, if you would have looked at Canonical Productions' website, it says Canonical Productions is a North Dakota-based film and theater production company that tells powerful stories of sacrifice, faith, perseverance that honor the land, history, and people of North Dakota. So we also feel like it's very similar wording for the eligibility to what Canonical had on their website a year before this was even out.
And those requirements all make sense to me until you get to the last one. Based in North Dakota, of course. Filming in North Dakota, yes. You had. Why would we grant you a grant? But then tells this story specifically about.
I think Ben's got a good point. I don't care what stories they're telling. I just want them to tell them in North Dakota. I mean, I think if you're going to get the North Dakota taxpayers involved, I think the only requirement is I'm not even sure that they have to be based in North Dakota. I mean, I get bigger than this, I just want to make films in North Dakota. I think the rest of it will happen organically. I think if we get them here and we're telling stories in North Dakota, then I think organically some of those stories are going to be about North Dakota. And organically, just that activity here in North Dakota is going to benefit the North Dakota film. That's all I'm really concerned about with the rest of it.
And most in Williston, and you do a shot of a mountain range in Montana, you shouldn't have like bookkeepers going like, well, I don't know if you get this $25,000 seed money. Like, come on. If they're an LLC in North Dakota, I think it should be fine.
And I believe most grants that I've researched in surrounding states, at least 50 to 60% of the film needs to be shot in that state to be eligible for the grant.
Sure.
And so I think something like that, where it doesn't matter the story, because I mean, we could do a wild story on green screen, but employ a bunch of North Dakotans to tell it, even though it has nothing to do about North Dakota.
So Matt and I have debated about the film production stuff, because I've been a little skeptical in the past of them. I think I've come around a little bit more. But I remember I wrote something. There was this ridiculous TV show. It was a drama. I think it was on ABC. It was supposed to be about it was short-lived. It was supposed to be about the oil boom. And it was like, we're out here in Williston, North Dakota. And then they show the background. And there's these big, craggy, snow-capped mountains in the background. And I wrote about it. Like, what is that? Have these people never been to Williston? Like, I've never seen. There's no mountains like that in North Dakota. Well, they filmed
and it was starring the Miami Vice guy, right?
They filmed it in Utah, and I think Matt emailed me and totally dunked on me. He's like, Rob, this is why we ought to have film incentives in North Dakota. And I was like, all right, shut up, Matt. I don't even know if I responded to your email.
Good for you, Matt, for persevering.
Don't confuse me with facts, Matt Fern. All right. Anyway, I think stuff like, listen, I think that's the point. I think this is a fun thing. I think for not a lot of public money, we could do a lot of good by fostering the film industry in North Dakota. I think there's economic implications. I think there's cultural implications. There's all sorts of good stuff. And again, we're not talking, I mean, $600,000 is a lot of money. In the term of the overall state budget, it's not really a lot of money. But if we don't do it right, look at the legacy of Woolly Boys. You guys remember that, Woolly Boys?
I remember the name. I never saw the movie.
It was a movie. I think Chris Christopherson was in it. The taxpayers funded it. It bombed. We lost a bunch of money. And it left a bad taste in the mouth of a generation of North Dakotas. Woolly Boys, to this day, comes up when we talk about film incentives in North Dakota. If you screw this up, it creates long-lasting problems. And so I guess that's my message. I just want them to do better because I want this stuff to work. Matt, thank you. Anything else, Matt? And thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, and we've been trying to fight that Woolly Boys misconception for years, and we're just not looking forward to that now. Canonical Productions is getting $600,000 to shoot another movie in Medora. We're a little afraid of how that's going to turn out, but like I said, I think these grants are great. I think they can do a lot of good, but I think we need to have some sort of guidelines, requirements, so the state can get the most for their investment. And if there are no guidelines, at least have some requirements for who can qualify for them. I do not believe a page-and-a-half document deserves $600,000.
Incentive. It's the down payment versus the mortgage. Like, don't have a state-run movie. Have some incentive to come here or tax credits.
At the very least, how about let's try to make sure that all of North Dakota's filmmakers know there's a grant available too, or at least make a reasonable effort. Because on the $600,000 one, when it's 6 business days and you're dropping the news, you're doing a Friday news dump on the announcement of it. Come on.
Yeah, that's 5 days is insane.
Yeah,
I believe for filmmakers to find it, prepare, learn about it, because this is the first time we heard about it because they never said anything about the $100,000 2 years ago, and then to submit for it, prepare a project for it is insane.
And we're one of 4 states that does every other year sessions, meaning. What's the rush?
Yeah.
Have it out for the rest of the year and don't grant it until the next year. You're fine. I don't get it.
The Commerce has said that the funds need to be expended by the end of this biennium. And I believe to you, Rob, one of the spokespersons said the reason it was so short was so that the recipient would have the maximum amount of time to use the funds. However, I strongly disagree with that. I believe the Commerce should only be focused on responsibly allocating and fairly allocating those funds. The only reason that makes sense to me is if they already knew the applicant wanted to make 2 films in that time frame, the same person. And that seems like such a crazy investment for us to put all that money on the same filmmaker, make 2 films. What if one of them's a hit, the other one's a bomb, and drags the other one down?
Matt, I'd like to know who told you that, because that does not jive with what the budget process is in North Dakota. You pass the budget at the end of April, and it's good for the next 2 years. So you have all of 23 for grant application. You'd have all of 24 for them to spend that seed money.
Once you make the grant, I don't think the filmmaker has to comply with North Dakota's budget cycle, or at least I don't think they should have to. I mean, if you make a grant to somebody and they never produce the film, then maybe you need to consider that when they apply for the next grant, right? Like maybe that counts against them.
Even related, do we want to be awarding grants to filmmakers that go through a approval process? You tell them you need to use this money in calendar year 2024, and they're taking it. Say we've got us to a reasonable amount, seed money of 25, 50,000, and they can't figure out a way, if they have a production ready to go, of spending it in an entire calendar year. Is that someone we want to be awarding a grant to? That budgeting explanation makes no sense.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
This is so obvious to me. I cannot believe this has been 3 months of us trying to at least get some answers on this.
Well,
I mean, I understand that we haven't got acts of change, But the fact that the governor's office hasn't even responded to the 25 filmmakers from 17 tax-paying companies asking for answers is ridiculous and embarrassing to the state of North Dakota.
I have a column up about that, and I'm a little upset with Governor Burgum. And not even that Governor Burgum has to meet with you personally. Have a member of his staff meet with you. Let's talk about. Let's go through the process. Let's get input.
Or the department. Give you a statement.
Yeah, let's get input. Let's get input about what can we do better. Hey, this is why we did this. What can we do better? Let's work together so that this could be a positive experience for North Dakota filmmakers. I don't think that's too much to ask. Maybe it's time for Doug to come home from Iowa and New Hampshire and govern the state again. I don't know. We'll talk more about that in the next segment. Matt, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate your time.
Hi there, my name is James Wallner. I produce and host the podcast Dakota Spotlight, a true crime podcast that tackles historical and unsolved crimes in the upper Midwest. Follow along with me as we search for a missing girl, attempt to solve a 45-year-old murder, and much, much more. That's Dakota Spotlight Podcast, anywhere you get your podcasts, or at inforum.com/podcasts.
Okay, just finished up with Matt Fern, very talented filmmaker, one of many very talented filmmakers who work in North Dakota. And I don't know, I mean, maybe people are like, well, Rob, you're a conservative. Why do you want to spend money on this? Because sometimes I do think the government has a role in catalyzing industry. I mean, we do it all the time with the oil industry. We do it all the time with businesses. I don't see it as a problem if it's done the right way. And that's what bothers me about this. Not that we're doing it. I think it's great that we're doing it. I think it's a great idea that we're doing it. I want us to do it better. That's what really bothers me about this. And I'm worried that when you do it poorly and it makes negative headlines, you generate public backlash for people who don't ever want to do this.
I completely agree with that. This process feels shady. I maybe shouldn't even say the word shady, because sometimes we assign things in governments that, especially citizen legislatures, that aren't nefarious in intent. I don't know about the idea of an ethics complaint with it. I think the process needs to be more transparent and available to more people. To me, it's utterly silly that one entity got this entire budget item. That seems like way too much. That doesn't
even. I mean, listen, Canonical Production makes good films, right? So this isn't some self-licking ice cream cone where we dumped a bunch of money on a company that didn't actually deliver. They've delivered. It's not the producers. It's not a scam. There are real products made. But at $600,000, which was the last grant they received, I believe it was for 2 separate productions. But there are plenty of independent productions where $600,000 is the budget. Sure.
And to Matt's point, he had 17 other filmmakers there representing 17 companies. Those are just the people that were able to show up to a press conference in Bismarck. There are more than that in North Dakota. And if you divvy this out into, maybe it's an artificial limit, but like a max between like 20 or like levels, tiers, 10,000, 25,000, 50,000 of seed money, you could start or get rolling production on a lot of other things. And when you're in, say, a for-profit company that makes a lot of products, there's a lot of times where they come out with 10 new products attempting to sell, and only 3 of them make it, but those other 7 were the failures that led them to the successful ones. It's a rough analogy, but you could do the same here with film production grants. There could be somebody who's so talented or catches fire with just $50K, they come on North Dakota and sing North Dakota's praises in a way that, like, frankly, I think we maybe overuse like a Josh Duhamel, who happens to be a Hollywood actor who is proud of his North Dakota roots. But like we go that well over and over and over again. Yeah. Why not diversify? Why not let people know what it's like to film here? Why not attract more productions here? Take away this like need to make it North Dakota specific, or maybe have a separate thing for that, and allow production to flourish here with transparency and see what happens.
So that's So I am willing to concede that the problem here is tunnel vision. Right? I don't see any indication that it's a backroom deal or somebody's brother-in-law is getting a sweetheart deal or anything like that. It doesn't even bother me that the full amount went to one production company. Like if one company has a really good idea, and there's this money available, maybe that's appropriate. What I'm saying is that doesn't bother me as much as the fact that they just seem to design the process because they already knew who they wanted to get the money.
The one recipient does. I understand your point. I think it's valid if there's a company that simply shows that they're just above and beyond and they were the number one applicant. One, as we've said multiple times now, there wasn't a really true, like, transparent, communicated application process. But I actually think when you have a state grant for tax incentives, only giving one award for the full amount that was appropriated does, by implication, maybe show like favoritism or maybe picking winners on a government side. And I think there's an easy way around this. It's a $600,000 or whatever it is, but $600,000 appropriation, then cap the amount given at like $50,000 so that you can have multiple applicants for multiple productions. And the state shows we're not picking favorites. We're putting out seed money and seeing where and who grows and let the market decide from there.
I even want more flexibility than that. I want them to be able to give. If somebody's got a really good idea this year, then I don't have the problem.
I hear what you're saying.
It doesn't have to be an everybody gets a trophy situation. Yeah. It can be. This is a really like head and shoulders above everybody else good idea this time around. Not to say that the other film producers can't have great ideas too, but at some point, if you're going to do something like this, somebody has to exercise some judgment, right? Somebody has to go through and discern what's the best avenue for taxpayer dollars. And I understand that's really hard, and I don't want a Monday morning quarterback that process. What I do want though is I don't think it's the best process that it can be if it's not open enough so that everybody who might want to take advantage of it can be aware of it and can prepare to submit a proposal and have the time to do it. When you announce it on a Friday afternoon, and then basically, if we don't count that Friday, basically 5 business days later, it's closed. And then 14 days later, they've already decided who gets the money. That does not sound like a situation where it was a truly competitive and open process.
To that point, I completely agree with you, but two, never mind me or you. Matt was kind of giving me the impression, and I agreed with him. He's like, he kind of seemed to be saying, like, am I crazy? This seems so weirdly reductive, like so weirdly closed off. Isn't this not how this is supposed to run? And how hasn't, to the point of your article, and now I think hopefully you and they have stirred up the nest enough that they're going to have to respond. But how doesn't someone at the Chamber of Commerce say, okay, this is an unforced error. This is a clear PR black eye that we should just go out and address? Because at the end of the day, it's $600,000 of taxpayer money. Yes, in the grand scheme of things, we have I don't know that
we need to call out like the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, you have the filmmaker.
Oh, sorry, Department of Commerce. Okay. No, I said the wrong thing.
Oh, okay.
The Department of Commerce is who the grant is through.
Sure.
So they do need to respond. How aren't you just putting out a statement? How aren't you giving an email back? How aren't you hopping on the phone at a time convenient to you? Like, they don't work for them one way or another, but like, say, hey, what do you got free this week? I want to hop on the phone with you for a half hour and explain our thoughts and our process in 3 months. I mean,
listen, North Dakota's filmmaker community is not that big. They had 17 filmmaking organizations represented at the Capitol this week. I think they had more than 20 that signed a previous letter. That's just about the entire filmmaking industry in North Dakota, right? There's not a lot more.
No,
I mean, you're talking.
There's not an association. There's not a union. These are just people.
You're talking about the bulk of it, and they're saying this process wasn't fair. How does that not prompt the Commerce Department to have why do they let it get to the point where they have to hold a press conference and call them out right outside? I mean, for their Memorial Hall, they're right outside the governor's office. Why let it get to that point? I don't understand. And I think that speaks to the column I wrote today, which is that I think Governor Burgum's distracted. I think he's so consumed with running for president that he's not attending to business back here in North Dakota. It never should have got this far. The Commerce Department should have brought these filmmakers in and said, all right, you got a problem with it. That's water under the bridge. Let's figure out how we can do better with this in the future. And let's design a program. Let's do something that works. That's proactive. So this really bothers me that it was handled this way and that the filmmakers just kind of got a stiff arm. I mean, they got some very sort of pro forma responses from the Commerce Department, and that's it.
And I wanted to address for the more skeptical, understandably skeptical folks who are saying, hey, this is North Dakota. Our two main industries are energy and agriculture. What are we doing getting into the, I don't want us to be Hollywood. I don't want us to be.
Because we should diversify our economy.
We should diversify our economy. And none of these tax incentives were ever overnight success stories, but they're not throwing away good money after bad. In the cases of both, the two we name checked, Canada in general and Toronto, and then Atlanta and Georgia in general, they have had way more money impacting the economy to the Hospitality Association, to other net groups than it's like when the big hockey tournament comes into town. Yeah, the parents spent money you're spending money on the jerseys, you're spending money on equipment, but the restaurants, the hotels, everything surrounding it gets a big boost, way more than was spent in taxpayer incentive dollars. And I want to shout out a couple other things about North Dakota too. We just want to cheerlead North Dakota a little bit. We have in Fargo, the Fargo Film Festival, which has been running for 20 years now, and some very well-known filmmakers, Mike Flanagan, who directed Dr. Sleep and Midnight Mass on Netflix, and he just came out with The Fall of House of Usher. He premiered Oculus, his short movie, at the Fargo Film Festival. And he comes to the Fargo Film Festival. He and his partner, Kate Siegel, do. I met them at the Fargo Film Festival. They were there. They come back. He is famous now. Or as far as directors go, he makes big productions. He still comes back to the Fargo Film Festival in person and just sits and hangs out with everybody. There's an animator named... I'm forgetting his name now. Don Hertzfeldt, who premiered some of his animated shorts here. He's of national acclaim. He still comes back to the Fargo Film Festival every year. There are ways to take these productions, premiere them here, get international attention here, let alone national attention here. There are people who have filmed things here who I know of. I'm just going to do one more name check. Nikki Rodenberg, who graduated from Fargo South High a year before I did. She lives in New York now, and she and Colin Frober, another Fargo South High graduate, came back to Fargo, went all over North Dakota to film something called Glob Lessons, G-L-O-B. It's an intentional misspelling. If you watch the movie, you'll understand why. It's streaming. I looked it up on Mubi, M-U-B-I. But it played at the Tribeca Film Festival, Cleveland International Film Festival. These are big ones in the last. They could have used $25,000 of seed money. They filmed exclusively in North Dakota, and the movie looks different than other movies because it actually looks like here. You don't see to your point about when they did that dumb show set in the
I forget what it was called. I think it was called Oil Boom or something. I don't know.
Blood and Oil. That was it.
Blood and Oil. That's right. There it is.
What a dumb name. But it looked like Utah, right?
Because it was Utah. It was literally Utah.
Yeah, you could have things that are shot here by look at that example. People who are from here, they went on and had a career, an acting career, and whichever else in New York City. Right. They wanted to come back here, film here, make a movie here. Why weren't people like that should be allowed to hear about this, get a small grant, make it that much easier, and be able to talk about Fargo and promote not just Fargo, North Dakota. They ain't just film in Fargo, and it just makes sense.
One thing that, because I think sometimes when we talk about this, we get really hung up on, well, people come and stay in hotels here, and they'll shop in the convenience store, and they'll buy gas. And I mean,
that's a big deal for the local economy. That's not nothing.
It is, but I don't know that it's the most inspiring thing. I think, and listen, I don't want to say don't talk about that. Do talk about that, but let's also talk about North Dakota our economy is driven by commodities. Right, it's energy and it's farming or ranching, and I think of like generations of North Dakotans. I know how many people feel this way, and you have children who aren't maybe going to work in those industries and who aren't that interested in working in the businesses that have formed in our state around those industries. They want to do something else. They want to have other opportunities. So how many generations of North Dakotans have seen their children leave and go somewhere else because they're not a farmer, they're not an oil worker, and there's nothing wrong with those jobs at all. Those are wonderful, wonderful jobs, but it's just not the right fit for them. That's a square peg in a round hole. By creating opportunities in the creative industries, by creating these and all the other things that could create, maybe those generations in North Dakotans don't have to leave, right? Many of them love North Dakota. Many of them don't want to leave North Dakota. I think one of the reasons why North Dakota is so in love with Josh Duhamel is because he's the exception that proves the rule. He went somewhere else. He created a pretty strong, pretty good movie career, but he's always come back home to North Dakota, right?
And, he's clearly never forgotten those roots. He's breaking up over the flood in Minot.
And I'm not
he's
going
so
to say,
touched
listen,
by it. He comes back here. He comes home. But
I don't think we're ever going to have a situation where you can build a Hollywood career in North Dakota. If you're pursuing,
and that's not the purpose of this either.
That's not the purpose. But we could create. If you're interested in making films, if you're interested in doing creative, telling stories that way, we could create more opportunities for you to find a way to make a living in North Dakota. And maybe not you, but maybe your child, right? Maybe your nephew, maybe somebody else like that. Well, to me, that's the inspiring thing about this.
Well, and you I know you're not trying to be dismissive, but you're saying maybe don't lead with the hospitality.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I don't want to diminish that.
They have not had an easy time of it in the last decade or so. Anything that can help out there is a inherently great thing.
I'm not diminishing that, but I think you lead with this: how transformative stuff like this can be for our state, and it starts small. It starts small. Right, it starts with a production company that's maybe they're doing ads most of the time, and they have some passion project on the side. You don't know what's going to take off, and there's so many. I mean, we kept talking about Fargo, but Reservation Dogs, another hit television series, not
on
based
Hulu.
in North Dakota, but could be. I mean, it's a Native American story, right? So, which state has a pretty large Native American population that I know has a lot of very wonderful stories to tell, or very harrowing stories, or scary stories, or just stories in general.
And my God, we could have separate, we could have a story from Standing Rock Tribe, and we could have stories from 3 affiliated tribes, because it turns out Native Americans aren't a monolith, so we could have different stories.
Right.
Filmed in different reservations. Well,
we kind of learned that with this redistricting thing that came down, where I thought the national reaction to that was really unfair, where it was like North Dakotans were out to suppress Native Americans. Okay, why did both Native American lawmakers in the legislature vote for the map?
We almost we're threatened with a special session again, and now we might not. And has there been an update on if there's a stay on that or not? Because it's supposed to be December 22nd.
Yeah, I have a feeling there's going to be a stay, and they're going to appeal. I mean, they're going to have to figure it out before the next election. For sure,
but they got plenty of time to do that. I'm worried if they try and do it before December, I guess we're transitioning fully here, December 22nd, they might not be able to get quorum. You're going to have legislators who are out of town, man. We got Christmas button up here, and the second half of December is not famous for having North Dakotans stick around, frankly.
One nice thing is that the legislature does have the capacity to allow lawmakers to participate remotely, which we did not necessarily, so that's a new dynamic. But I have a feeling that December deadline is not going to stand. But it really frustrated me, sort of the public reaction to that, including what came from the Democrats, where they're like, Republicans did this terrible thing. Well, you guys voted for it too. So,
and I saw Mike LaFleur's op-ed, which did get into some details, and which I appreciated. Did you see, it was a Twitter thread, maybe you should try and publish it. Did you see Zach Ista's, breakdown explanation he put on Twitter about his route with voting for it?
I saw his reaction, his quote that was put out by the North Dakota Democratic Party, which I thought was partisan and terrible, and unfortunate. If he has further explanation that he decided to put on social media, I mean, maybe he could have put that in the press release that his party sent out.
Hey, all fair points, and the details get muddled pretty quickly when it comes to press releases from any political party. But I'll both siders that a little bit. But I'll send you that. But that's an off air. No need to have the off air production meeting on air.
Well, yeah. I think people were imputing motivation to that map that I don't think is fair. When Ruth Buffalo, who is a former state rep from Fargo, member of the 3 affiliated tribes, when she's standing up on the floor of the House and commending the redistricting committee for the work they did, I don't see how you could say. Yep. I don't see how you could say that map was intended to suppress Native Americans. Now I understand the Turtle Mountain Reservation and the Spirit Lake Reservation. Yeah. They didn't get what they wanted. They filed a suit. That's their right. But first of all, the Voting Rights Act too is, when it comes to this, is a mess. You look at the way courts have ruled on these maps. It is. I mean, if you could find like a discernible common theme to any of it, I challenge you, because it's a mess.
What I don't, because this was based on precedent set in South Dakota, I've now understood, splitting up House districts from Senate districts, and maybe we should have somebody on to do like a whole segment on that. I shouldn't
have brought up the very complicated redistricting issue at the end of the podcast when we had like 5 minutes left.
What?
Yeah, I shouldn't have done that.
I will never understand why, if you're going to do that, you don't do it universally. And for those that advocate the best form of government is local government, I think there's almost no better example of that than splitting up a Senate district so that a House district is truly a one person versus one person race. They represent less people, and therefore they're that much more locally accountable in one chamber versus another. It makes perfect sense to me. I don't know why you don't just do it all around.
I don't have a problem, because that, for those of you who don't know, that was one of the innovations for North Dakota anyway of this legislative map that's now being challenged in court, is that they created sub-districts in District 4 and District 9. Now, these are two districts that touch the 3 affiliated tribes, Fort Berthold Reservation and the Turtle Mountain Reservation. And they created sub-districts in those House districts. So in a normal legislative district, everybody in the district votes for 1 senator and 2 House members. In those districts, everybody votes for 1 senator, but then District A votes for 1 House member, District B votes for another. I think if you're going to do that, you do that in every district across the state. Although, by the way, again,
would make perfect sense for me.
For the people saying that North Dakota's legislative map was racist, I would point out that those sub-districts resulted in the election of 2 Native American women.
For those who, by the way, want to vote for term limits or think people are in too long or think people are entrenched, subdividing up the House districts would make it so that, Democrats or Republicans tend to run on a 3-person ticket as a legislative team. Well, they're not the 3 same people, even if they're from the same party. In fact, they can vote very, very differently, even if they're from the same party. If you subdivide up those House districts, it would make every candidate have to campaign and, so to speak, fend for themselves in a way I think would be good, because they would be that much more personally accountable, Democrat or Republican, for individual things they've said versus the money raised as a joint ticket versus a joint yard sign. I think it increases accountability and it puts more skin in the game for everybody. I think it would make perfect sense.
I don't think it makes,
and it would be consistent.
I don't think it makes that big of a difference. I think you're kidding yourself, but I also don't care about it enough to oppose it. If that's what's going to make people happy.
And that's why we're going to have every year session with 2-year House terms and A and B districts. Do it all tomorrow. Ben Hanson's legislature for everybody.
Well, I feel like a full-time legislature may be coming if we abolish property taxes and we don't have term limits, and if we're going to do these other things, may be in an inevitability.
Property district, you can't bring up property taxes with 1 minute to go on the show.
I cannot. Yeah. All right. Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to close the show now before I start talking about a lot of other stuff. Hey, Ben, let's quick in 30 seconds. Let's sum up the differences between the American Revolution and the French Revolution. Let's get into it.
Well, the reason that the War of 1812
Shut up. We're ending the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again. Did you know Forum Communications Company has a robust podcast library? At inforum.com/podcasts, we have everything from politics, sports, true crime, outdoor adventure, and more. Visit inforum.com/podcasts and explore them all today.